Today, we're going to talk about something that pretty much a lot of us will carry so quietly, and that's the weight of the patterns that we did not create. The trauma that we didn't start, the behaviours that were taught to us way before we can even understand what they mean. And probably a lot of points in our lives, we would think that this isn't mine, but it's definitely affecting me. So, this episode is for anyone who grew up around any type of trauma, chaos, in silence, in survival mode, or being simply around those who didn't know how to love you the way that you needed. Anyone who is trying to heal from the wounds that they never chose. Because breaking generational cycles is hard, trust me. But somebody has to do it. Somebody has to say, it ends with me. And that's exactly what I have done. I had got to the point where I was like, no, this ends now. This ends with me breaking this cycle, because growing up around trauma and abuse and stuff that me and my siblings shouldn't have grown up around, and it's all down to my parents and their trauma, and then their trauma, their parents' trauma, and so on and so on and so on. If you don't break the cycle will continue on. And unfortunately, we have to heal from stuff that we did not ask for. And unfortunately, that is life. That is life. And we just have to get through it and get over it and heal from our shit. I know we didn't ask for it, but unfortunately, it is fucking life. So, trauma is actually probably more common than we actually think. I understand that when we go through things, we probably think that we are the only person that has gone through this or is going through this, but that's a lot of time not true. So, around 70% of adults will experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime, and most people never actually process it. Which I can get, I can totally understand. Like, imagine going through something so difficult and so hard that you didn't ask for. Like, no one teaches you how to process these things. Like, there's not a guide or a class where they teach you how to process, how to get through a traumatic event. I mean, there might be, but it's not something I have ever come across. So what actually happens? This traumatic event will be carried over into your adulthood, your relationships, your parenting, sorry, into your communication without even realizing. That's why generational trauma is such a big thing. Like, parents will always put their unhealed trauma onto their children, and to be honest, it's not fair on the child. You know, they didn't ask to be here, and if you can't be bothered to want to heal from your shit, I get it. It's probably different nowadays than it was back in the day, but there's a lot more knowledge and resources out there to understand more of this. A lot of triggers that we do have today are wounds that we haven't healed from in our past. Sometimes it can even be decades. And I guess for most of us, those patterns didn't start with us. It started with the generations before us and then the generations before that. It's actually wild, but research actually shows that emotional patterns can be passed through 3 generations. So, meaning you might be reacting to things your parents never healed from, and they were reacting to things that their parents never healed from. That's sometimes why your behavior may not make sense, because it's not actually your behavior. It's something you've actually inherited from your parents or their parents. The people who raised us, most likely did the best that they could do, but sometimes, that they are operating from their own pain. And how can you simply look after someone and raise a child if your wounds haven't been healed? Our childhood shapes our adult reactions. And here I got a stat: around 80% of as 80% of adults raised in chaotic or emotional unstable homes developed heightened stress responses. They could look like shutting down during conflict, people pleasing, constantly feeling on edge, expecting the worst, struggling with emotional regulation. Then, as adults, we think it's just how we are, but it's not. It's how we were taught to survive. And for me, I'm pretty sure that is how I developed ADHD. You know, people can get ADHD for many reasons, but growing up in a chaotic or abusive environment, because growing up around stress actually changes the development of the brain. So, some points here: growing up around violence, domestic abuse, shouting, chaos, unpredictable anger, emotional neglect activates the child's fight or flight system constantly. When a child is in a survival mode every day, the brain adapts. This impacts areas linked to attention, impulse control, emotional regulation. And trauma actually reduces dopamine, the main ADHD chemical. ADHD is strongly linked to low dopamine levels. So, research shows that trauma, fear, and exposure to violence lowers the dopamine in a child's brain. This causes restlessness, impulsivity, zoning out, trouble focusing, and hypervigilance. And I think as a child, I did act up a lot because I guess I wasn't getting the attention I actually needed. Growing up in an environment that clearly was very stressful for me and my brain, and obviously for my siblings. They're much older, so they probably remember more. But for me, I was very young. I don't fucking remember anything, to be honest. Like, only the bad parts. But I guess I can probably do a deeper dive into that another time. But I have digressed. So how do generational patterns actually form? Some people actually don't um talk about it enough, but how trauma actually affects your whole body and not just your brain. Chronic stress and unhealed trauma can actually increase the risk of anxiety and depression by 200%. Do you know how crazy that is? 200%. So when you're triggered, your body actually reacts in the original danger, thinking that is happening again. It's not that you're being dramatic, it's not that you're being too sensitive. Your body is literally just trying to protect you from something that happened in the past. And I think that's why it's just really important to try and really delve deep into our unhealed trauma, because the stats say it for itself. Anxiety, depression is up by 200% because we haven't dealt with the pain that was given to us in our past experiences. But it's not just the fact about anxiety and depression. It can also lead to chronic illnesses. Like my mum, I don't know if she want me to talk about this, but my mum has a lot wrong with her body. And I feel I am 100% convinced it's because of all of her unhealed trauma. And I feel so sad for her because she has gone through a lot in her life, and it makes me so fucking sad. Um, like, it really does, but it is now really affected her, and it's so upsetting to to see and witness. Like, she wasn't deserving of this pain and struggle, but I don't think she knew how to heal from her stuff. And I feel like I'm digressing. I'm getting emotional now, so it's probably I should probably move on. But it can affect your whole body, not just your brain. You know, illnesses thrive on stress. So obviously, the more you stress, the more illnesses that your body is going to want to receive. So here's the truth, right? Around 60% of adults admit they repeat behaviours they witnessed growing up, even the ones they swore they would never repeat, right? So maybe you shut down like one parent, you get anxious like another. Maybe you choose emotional, unavailable partners. I know I have, and because at the end of the day, the things that you do not heal from, you will attract, right? Whether they're shitty partners, you will still attract that unless you learn how to heal from those past relationships. And that's something that I have dealt with myself. Um, and I've kind of got to a place where I know what I don't want from a partner because I know I have known how to heal from that. And again, maybe you give too much love, like, trying to earn your worth. And that's something I've done as well. I've given way too much love in the past, but I think it's because I wasn't given the love that I needed. So I always put it out there to try and get it back. But again, if you don't heal from that, you are not going to get that back. The moment you realize the pattern, something really does shift. You hear your own tone, you recognize a reaction that isn't even yours. You notice that you're carrying a pain that didn't even begin with you. That moment, that awareness, like that is so powerful because being aware alone is going to increase your chance of breaking that generational trauma by 35 to 50%. Just being self-aware alone. That's so powerful. The moment you recognize the pattern, the moment is when you can start taking control over it. So it's time to become the one who ends this goddamn cycle. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean becoming perfect. No one is perfect at the end of the day. It just means becoming conscious. It just means you're choosing differently. It just means you're treating yourself with the love that you just never received. This is actually insane, right? Studies show that when just one person in a family chooses to heal and communicates better or emotionally regulate, it can reduce that negative pattern for future generations by up to 50%. That's how powerful one healed person can be. Like up to 50%, it can break the cycle. I mean, I don't want kids, so I guess in that sense doesn't really matter for me, but for a lot of people do want children, and to break that cycle to help your future generations is so important. So what does breaking the cycle actually look like? So it looks like apologizing instead of shutting down. I guess in arguments and conflicts, a lot of the time people may choose to just shut down, but it's being aware in that moment and choosing to actually communicate and to listen and to apologize instead of uh, arguing back, I guess, and just shutting down. It looks like choosing partners who feel safe. Now, for me, I've been single nearly 2 years, and I'm definitely not going to settle unless it's someone I feel 100% completely safe with in all aspects of life. Choosing a partner is choosing the right partner is so important. It's a family member who you actually get to choose, and you should choose wisely. You should not settle down with someone who probably hasn't healed from their trauma, because that's going to really affect your relationship. It's really important to feel safe with someone. It looks like taking accountability without destroying yourself. It looks like how to self-soothe, how to communicate. I mean, a lot of the times this is something I really did struggle with. Being neurodiverse, I would always shut down. I really struggled to self-soothe. Like, I really like when I was having like a breakdown or a meltdown, I would always like pick at my skin, or I'd always like pull up my hair. But I've kind of got to the point where I know how to not get to that place. And I'm really better at communicating now. And it's becoming the person that you needed when you were younger. I think for me, I'm just more of a headstrong kind of person. I think growing up, I didn't really get what I needed. And now I'm becoming the person who I I need in all aspects of my life. This is why I feel like I don't really need a partner, because I've got to a place where I can give everything that I need for myself. I think not having a partner is is for them to give you something, but I've got to a place where I'm very happy with myself and I love myself to not just to be with anyone, basically. So just remember, you aren't what you came from. You know, you didn't choose the environment that you grew up in, but you can choose how you can grow from it. You know, you didn't choose the traumas that shaped you, but you can choose the healing that is going to free you. So if you listen to this and you feel tired or overwhelmed, or you feel like you're carrying more than you should, just remember, you're not weak from breaking the cycle. You're so brave for actually even recognizing it. And a lot of people don't have that. You know, it's okay. It's going to take time. Healing is not linear. It's not linear. You know, it's just that you're actually finally choosing yourself. That is powerful. So if you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.